Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's Jeff Heilman Project. I'm Jessica Heilman, and seated to my right, your left, I don't know how it works on the camera,
Something about a
but
stage.
there's Jeff Heilman here in the house.
What's going on, peoples?
And I thought today, since it is August 4th, 2 days ago, we celebrated as a country the 250th year on the dot from August 2nd of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. And I wanted to make sure that we didn't talk about, obviously, the 4th of July, but this is actually a very significant day and time because it was when we declared our freedom. And there's a period of time between declaring freedom and actually walking in the legally backed act of the constitutionalized freedom. So for today's topic of conversation between us, we're going to be talking about the importance, like we talk a lot on the Jeff Heilman Project about renewing your mind and
podcast. We talk a lot because
and reading and like the importance of reading books and putting in good, PMA. But if we could until I started doing more research and until I started reading more books about the actual period of time that we were, proclaimed free and actually walking free. It's just hard to imagine a time when they're moving into an unknown, like no one had ever seen it like that before. No one actually knew. It was so important to read and reread the Declaration before the Constitution was written. It was so important to gather together with like-minded people and reiterate to each other why you're fighting, that I thought that we could talk about today, because a lot of times we talk about, oh yeah, read a good book, read books, reading books is good. But no, it is imperative. If you're going from a place that you're at to a whole new place that you've never been to before, to a whole new world that you've never even attempted to live in before, you're going from, being very comfortable making $30,000 a year, and you're trying to go to financial freedom we all know is probably going to be about $2 million a year in today's economy. There's a time period to where reading books and renewing your mind isn't just a good idea. It is the only way that you're going to be able to bridge the chasm between 30 grand a year and 2 million a year in order to establish your family.
Yeah.
And that's what these colonists had to do, is they had a declaration. And then they had no idea of what being free could even look like. That if they hadn't read, reread, fellowshipped, got back together every potluck, every meal, every time,
talked about,
then we wouldn't
notes.
Be free today. We wouldn't be free in America today if they hadn't doubled down on renewing their mind and re-educating to what it could look like, and then also getting together with like-minded people for what it could look like. And it's very easy to mystify, just close your eyes and visualize, what could it look like? What could it look like? And you can do that, but how many of you know that if you stand in a garage and call yourself a car, you can do that until you're blue in the face, you're not going to turn into a car. But when you go back to the books, go back to the blocking and tackling, go back to the reading. What could a car look like in my garage?
It has to become an identity.
Jeff asked me, what's today's topic going to be about? And I said, well, just wait and see. But literally, wait and see. You have to see it first, and then you're going to have to wait until you can see it manifest. And in that waiting period of bridging the gap, you have to renew your mind. You have to read, or nothing's ever going to change.
Yeah,
Nothing's going to change.
Romans, it talks about, this isn't a Christian podcast, but we're Christians on the podcast, and I reserve the right to look up Scripture anytime I want. Romans 2.
I don't know that the Apostle Paul would have even considered or called himself a Christian. I know he would have said he was a follower of Christ. He was a Roman, and he was a Jewish, and so being able to say, these are principles that we live by today that have been documented in the Holy Bible. But Paul wasn't reading a Bible when he said, renew your mind. Paul was having to go back to the importance of, we're starting a revolution And the revolution is according to these principles. We're no longer going to do Hebrew law. We're no longer going to do, Roman law. We've got principles. And this part of this principle is renew your mind.
That's right. 12:2. I don't know why it took me.
That's okay. It's
Took
still
me a minute.
early.
It took me a minute. I've read this scripture, I don't even know how many thousands of times. Let's start with 12:1 because that's the beginning of the chapter. There were no chapters in Romans when Paul wrote it, by the way. It was just
a letter.
Stream of consciousness. That's right. 12:1. Romans 12:1, it says, I beseech ye therefore, brethren, which is like beg with the highest possible urgency and petition. Beseech. It's not a word we typically use today, but in Old English, it's like a fervent, like, please, with all of my might, I beg of you to pay attention to this. So it's like, we look at John 3:2 or 3 John 2, where he says, I pray above all things that you prosper and be in health. That's John's prayer. Well, this sounds like Paul's top prayer. Is that I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice. That does not mean Joe versus the volcano, people. This is not like dying on the sword. It means that it's a living sacrifice. So you're not jumping into a volcano and dying. You're living. You're presenting your body a living sacrifice, holy, holy. That's holy.
All in,
righteous, not whole with a W. It's holy with a H. Acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable duty, or reasonable service in King James, reasonable duty in New King James. And then it says the part that you were talking about, Romans 12:2, and be not conformed to this world. That is like the epitome of validation-seeking behavior. Mm-hmm. And this pick me too, Instagram generation that's all about how you look, and the substance is not, it's not that the substance isn't there, it's that the substance isn't what's focused on. But he's saying here, and be not conformed to this world. Now, I have shoes because I need shoes, and hopefully they're cool, but my identity is not based on wearing Vans or Levi's or anything else. That's being conformed to this world. Be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed, transmuted, translated, worked from where you were to where you're going to be by what? By the renewing of your mind. And that renewing of the mind, I was listening to, if you haven't heard Science of Scaling by Benjamin Hardy, it's very good. It's very good. It deals with, effectively, Einstein talks about the theory of relativity, and he says, somebody asked him to explain it one time, and he said, well, have you ever been on a date? And he said, yeah. And he said, have you ever taken a term paper? And he said, yeah. And he says, the term paper, you want it to be over as fast as you can, and the date, the time seems like it goes by instantly. That's relativity. So that was his explanation, is that when we understand that the picture of our future self as pulled backwards through time becomes the present picture that we're holding now. He's talking about transforming yourself into a better version of yourself by holding that picture in your mind. And it's the renewing of the mind that may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. It is God's perfect will that we drive in cars that are safe and comfortable and that we enjoy. Why else would it say he gives us richly all things to enjoy? Either he said he gives us richly all things to enjoy, or he didn't. And if he didn't, then keep driving your junker, right? Nothing wrong with driving a junker if that's what your dream is. And if God didn't say, hey, we give you richly all things to enjoy. But if he says, I give you richly all things to enjoy, and you got a Mercedes or BMW or whatever, enjoy it, for goodness sakes. He gave it to you to enjoy.
Or a Jeep Wrangler like me.
Or a Jeep, right? Your Jeep Wrangler. So if he says, I gave you richly all things to enjoy, then enjoy it. If you don't enjoy it because you got a car payment on it, then pay it off or get rid of it if it's causing havoc. But if you enjoy it, I have put 80-something thousand miles on my car, half of which was during COVID. Where do I got to be? Nowhere. But I just really enjoy driving around in my car. So I've probably put 15 to 17,000 miles a year on my car doing nothing, driving nowhere, driving up and down Stevens Creek 473 times. But I enjoy it. I thoroughly enjoy it. So the renewing of our mind is all about pulling with everything we've got, that future version of what we can see happening into a present version that's at least spiritually relevant, because it's renewing and it's rekindling that desire.
Rewriting
Yeah,
also while
exactly
while
right.
you're reading.
And we have to do that with freedom, because freedom isn't free. Freedom isn't automatic. In case anybody who doesn't believe in God, just look at a 2-year-old playing with toys. Like, the room will go from perfect to destruction in a matter of 5 minutes. The fork goes into the electric socket like almost automatically. Cars do not get clean by themselves. They go from clean to dirty by themselves. The world goes from structure and organization by mankind, creating that discipline, to unstructured and undisciplined.
Well, everything is in a state of decay. If you leave something alone long enough, it will decay. It won't get better over time.
If you leave your freedom alone long enough, if you do not fight, and you were talking earlier, I'm sure you'll touch on Valley Forge a little bit, but if you're not willing to fight to remain free, in order to remain sober, in order to remain coherent, in order to remain healthy, in order to remain rich and getting richer, in order to remain more sovereign in our thinking and the way that we apply our leadership, then it's going to go backwards by automatic.
I was thinking this morning, I geek out at when we go to my favorite thing, and I've talked about it on the podcast before, about going to an art museum, is going in front of the masters. You got Picasso, you've got Da Vinci, you've got Van Gogh, Monet. Some of them, like even the modern museums with like Andy Warhol, some of them you can actually get like within 3 feet or like in proximity to the canvas.
Right. Yeah, right,
and when I stand, I love to stand about 3 feet back, and I like to stand right in front of it, and my mind goes to like the actual artist himself or herself would have stood this far away from this piece of work to step back and look at it. Like, I'm standing in proximity, like on plane with, if a multiverse or whatever, like I could be right where that person was in this painting. Like, this painting is holding it just makes me feel like I am in the present, not just the presence of the painting being great and let's look at the painting, but like within this field of proximity. This is where so this morning when I was reading this book that I'm reading by Glenn Beck about being George Washington, and he's talking about God and George Washington's belief in Scripture and the Bible and like in God the Almighty. And I was thinking about the fact that, like, while we're not holding the same physical Bible, Abraham Lincoln, George Washington read, and I am sure that they read, "Be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed 100%. By the renewing of your mind." And to be able to know that we're reading the same book, like this isn't like, some books are really good and they become like the most popular book. No, this is like guaranteed. They read these passages, and I could see
verbatim,
I could
King
see
James
him
Version.
Standing up in front of the colonists saying, "Do not be conformed to this world. Do not be conformed to the King of England, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind to what is possible within this revolution, to what is possible for what's to come."
That's right.
And so it just gave me like the goosebumps, because I'm thinking like, no, I'm reading what Abraham Lincoln read. I'm reading what George Washington read.
Yep.
I'm reading what these founding fathers read that inspired them to go through hell in order to purchase our freedom. And the renewing of the mind and getting things to where, look, I don't want to be busted, disgusted anymore. I don't want to be broke anymore. I'm going to go get the material. I'm going to go get the books. I'm going to read the same thing that George Washington read, that Abraham Lincoln read, that set the people free. A house divided against itself cannot stand. That is straight scripture, and Abraham Lincoln quoted it verbatim. Like, I'm going to do what it takes in order to stand up and bridge the gap for my family to create a revolution and to go from being in captive. Because if you don't fight and make the decision for freedom, you just remain subject to the king. Like, you will remain subject. Everyone is subject of something.
That's right.
And
If you're subject to a dream, if you're subject to freedom, if you're subject to higher ideals and higher standards, Tony Robbins talks all the time about set point and standards. And I think that if you see a people who were, let's put it this way, we've had a hot week this week. It's been 90s, mid to high 90s at the peak of the day. And there have been times when I've come home and the house is just really uncomfortably warm, probably 80 plus degrees inside the house if nobody's home and you turn off the air conditioning. Or sometimes we've had it set because we're trying to just conserve resources and be frugal. We've had it set at 75 or 76 or 77. It's not, the air conditioning will not go on. If the house is 77 degrees and the AC set at 77 degrees, the AC is not going to go on. But if you click it down to 74, the gremlins to start cranking the crank wheel down in the basement where the compressor is, and we start getting air conditioning. And you think about how hot it must have been, how hot under the collar the colonists must have been for the thermostat to kick in and be like, no, we're going to have an air conditioning level revolution, right? It was the American Revolution. Let's not forget, it's not the American War, it's not the Civil War, it's not World War II. It was the American Revolution.
Yeah.
It was an overthrowing of the government because the air conditioning, and part of that is how hot it is, right? Which is the king. The other part of it is how strong the American colonists had become and how high their standards must have been for freedom. Because here they're separated from London.
They'd never known anything. There was some
They've
idea
never lived
of
outdoors before. They're basically camping for years until they get the town built. They're having to farm their own land. They're planting crops they've never identified. They're braving winters. London has some tough winters, but it's nothing like a nor'easter coming in and just covering everything in frost for 4 months. So they're dealing with incredibly harsh, right? They're dying. They're taking 2 and 3 wives. Guys will take 2 and 3 wives because their wives die in childbirth because they don't have medical care. It's freezing freaking cold outside. They're working super crazy hard. Their kids they're having 6 and 7 kids because they're losing kids to all these diseases and diphtheria and dysentery and all. It's tough. Like they're really struggling to stay alive. But through that struggle, they become very strong. And then they start seeing this fat, live fat, dumb, and happy, let them eat cake.
You've got this. Oh, we're going to
aristocracy.
Hey, you just worked all that. Why don't you give us a tax on that? Why don't you give us
pay
some of that?
tax on the land that you worked your ass off so that you could survive through the winter with Indians trying to come in and kill you and or at war with you with the French and Indian War and all these things. Like you're constantly under attack. And then you got the king saying, I like my castle. Yeah. I need some more silk. I need some more indigo from the colonies. So we're going to tax the colonists on the land that they're living on. And after a couple hundred years of this, or after 1620 to 1770s, 150 years, they're like, FFS peoples, this is not how this is going down. It's like, it's one thing if you're going to be a partner with us. Because, we like marmalade and Paddington Bear and all that stuff too. But if we can't get marmalade and Paddington Bear and yet we have to pay taxes on all these exports that we're doing, and we're the ones doing all the work and you're the ones getting all the money, that standard changes the status quo in a way that the air conditioner goes on and they're like, no, we're not dealing with 82 degrees in the front parlor. We need an air conditioning.
And I think that this is a conversation that has spanned the generations. I think every generation says, I'm feeling persecuted. How do I move to the next step? How do I get beyond persecution to where I feel like I've got control of my destiny? I feel like we are in taking back that we can free our family from the persecutions that our grandparents and our great-grandparents and our great-great-grandparents had to go through in order to put us in the prime location. And so my encouragement today for anybody watching this podcast or listening would be to get the understanding that nothing's ever going to happen. No change is going to create on its own. There's no spontaneous combustion of change that's going to fall into your lap to where now you're free. You're going to have
no
to.
Robots. Somebody got 3 robots in a helicopter. There's no robots. There's no helicopter.
Have to do the exercises to build the muscle, to build the belief, to do the work in order to propel yourself into the freedom. You have to decide, meaning you have to murder all alternatives. If you look at the Latin root for the word decide, D is off and side is to kill. So you have to kill off every other option that's keeping you from where it is that you're supposed to be. Everyone knows intrinsically that they are supposed to be in a good place with good food and good climate and good environment. But how do we, if we know intrinsically that that's what God's best is for us, how do we get from feeling like we're in hell to now walking days of heaven on earth? And the only way is going to be continual renewing of your mind and not allowing the world's point of view to put you into a box to where you're only capable of doing what other people have said that you can do, or what your bank account says that you can do, or what your bestie says that you can do. And you're going to bust through. You got to bust through that, and you got to go through that glass ceiling. But then you're going to be propelled to the next level and the next level and the next level.
And I would encourage, I want you to tell them about Valley Forge.
Sure.
I want you to tell them about how they got tough during the winter.
So Valley Forge, George Washington needed a place to take his troops. They'd had some victories, not very many, but they had some. And the winters, as Jeff said, are extremely harsh in the east. And so they camped out at Valley Forge, and during their time,
the British took the winter off. It was so cold.
The British were very happy. The captains and the colonels and the generals were happy in Philadelphia. They had actually they'd taken Philadelphia back from the Americans, so Philadelphia was under British rule at that time. That's like and so while they were enjoying the nightlife, they were enjoying restaurants, they were enjoying being social, they were enjoying the winter Christmas and the feasts, and they were having all of their good times while holed up in Valley Forge. General Washington was throwing the dead bodies in the back because the people his soldiers were starving. His soldiers were malnourished. His soldiers were weak in physical body. They didn't have clothes. They were not getting the support that they needed for good, for food. They weren't getting the support financial for clothes. They weren't. So during this testing period in Valley Forge, what he decided to do was put his soldiers to work, retraining their mind, getting them to, he had a German man come in, and he had like 8 names. I couldn't tell you all of them, but he came in and he began to have drills every day, and he would take the soldiers out and he would shout at them in German, and he would cuss at them in German, and he would have them doing all the modern day tactics.
Things that were not speakable or repeatable in print, folks.
Yes, he would have them doing all of the modern so imagine with me that Rocky movie, and Andrew, which one is it? Jeff, which one is it where Rocky's in Russia and he's out there? Okay, so imagine with me Rocky IV.
How did you know that, Andrew?
Because he just watched all of them.
Oh, okay.
But Rocky IV with Sylvester Stallone, and so in Valley Forge, they are out there. They are, digging the ditches, and they got dead bodies to bury. Well, they're out there digging the ditches for the bodies. They're out there lifting tires. They're doing the whole nine. You got the dun 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 dun, and this is what General Washington is is building at Valley Forge. This is what's happening behind the scenes when everybody feels like you're in prison. Everybody feels like, but there's this internal, like there's this theme song, there's this drum beat that just begins building and getting stronger and stronger and stronger, so that when spring hits, when all the British loyalists come out of their little warm caves and they've put on their extra 30 and they've had all of their, fatted pigs and roast beasts, you got the real beasts coming out of Valley Forge, and they're ready, and they are more loyal than they've ever been. They're in better shape than they've ever been, and they're ready to win the revolution. They went from starting a revolution to renewing their mind toward revolution to coming out of Valley Forge ready to win the revolution, while everybody else was just, whoa.
And you think about what the percentage chances were in these battles and how much they mattered. It was less than 2% of the colonists. So I think the colonies had about 2 million people total. So you're talking about 40,000, 50,000 people.
Yeah.
Maybe, if I'm doing my math right, 10% would be 200,000.
Well, he took over Trenton in New Jersey with 2,500 soldiers.
2,500 soldiers. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So we're talking 40, 50,000, and the British had hundreds of thousands and all the money. But they had an ocean to cross.
Yeah.
So what they had to do is they had to lean on the loyalists here, which is 98%.
Yeah.
So they had 98% of the colonies against or neutral, which was not taking up arms, plus 100+ thousand soldiers, plus the fear. And George Washington is like way outnumbered, way outnumbered, outbeliefed, out supply chained in every way, shape, and form. But they had a higher standard. And if there's anything, the reason why Jessica and I have been able to survive 30 years of marriage, 7 kids, move into the 7-figure income range after dropping out of high school. And, I lived in my car. You lived with Teresa for a while, but I lived in my car and you lived on your own as teenagers. And we worked retail jobs for $4 or $5 an hour. And to be able to go from that to what we're doing right now, well, let's face it, it's not that big a deal because we have it easy. We speak English. We live in America. We're educated in Silicon Valley. You lose a $250,000 or $500,000 a year job, you can go across the street and get another one like it was nothing. Like all we did was we had very high standards for ourselves. We didn't set goal. I didn't set a goal to make the money that I made last year. Like that wasn't even a goal. It was a standard that we're going to do things at a world-class level of excellence. And honestly, like I think that it has been so easy for such a long time in America that people have just allowed their standards to erode. Because Jessica and I, we're not even doing that well. Like to make $1 million a year is not hard. And it took me a really long time. It took me till I was 50 to do it. There are millions of people in this country that make $1 million a year. There's tens of millions of people that make over 100,000. So if you're listening to this podcast and you're not pulling in that kind of money, first of all, we're not judging you because we weren't making that kind of money. I worked my first job when we got married, I think I was making $8 an hour working at an auto parts store. So I was not crushing it, folks, right? At 20 or 21, whatever I was. But our standards were very high. And so over time, as you move through your life, if your standards are high, that air conditioner is going to keep going. And eventually the temperature of the room is going to come to something you can live with. So if it takes you 20 years or 30 years or 40 years or 50 years to make 10 or 20 or 50 or $100 million, that's okay. But if you're 25 and 30 and 35 and 40 and you're still making minimum wage, I would look at, we're not judging you, right? Because we live like that. We're not any better than anybody else. But I would ask you to consider, where are your standards? Where is your thermostat set in your mind? Are you setting your thermostat at $1 million, $2 million a year of income? I don't care if you're making that kind of money. Is your thermostat set at that? Are you reading the books that people that make a couple $1 million a year? When I go out to dinner with people that make $50 and $100 million, which is way more than I've got. I mean, way more. We have a lively, interactive conversation on equal terms. And I'm told by people in those circles that, I'm one of the more interesting people. And part of the reason why I'm interesting is because I'm interested in them, because I have a high standard for engagement with people. That is something that has been curated because I really desperately wanted to understand what it was like to be successful. And I hope that comes through in the podcasts and the reels that we have for you today.
And if I could explain just for 1 second, because I know we don't have too much more time on the podcast, but if you have a vehicle, if you have a car, the desire is to be able to get in, turn on the ignition, and go somewhere. And maybe your standard is gasoline. Like let's just say, like, I want to make sure that there's gas in my car. That's perfectly acceptable. What we're talking about is the maintaining of the oil. And when you have to go the extra step to make sure that your car always has oil and that the oil is changed regularly, now you've increased your standard just a little bit. You went from, hey, I want to make sure that there's gas in my car, so I'm going to go get a job that can afford me gas. Well, now I need to make sure now, like I remember that one time I never changed the oil in my car and my car wouldn't start, and shoot, now I got to go ask for a new car. I got to go borrow a new car. I got to go say, Mom and Dad, I didn't. And so you learn that now you got to raise your standard to not just having gas, but regular oil changes. And then then maybe that now that you're getting your oil changed regularly, now maybe you go open the door and now you got a girlfriend and McDonald's trash falls out. Well, she don't want to be your girlfriend anymore. So it's like, I want to keep a girlfriend. So I'm going to keep the McDonald's trash out of my car. So now not only is your standard gone from putting gas in it, regular oil changes, because it's way more expensive to have to get a whole new car than to get your oil changed, to now it's got to stay clean because I want to get a girl. And then this is all we're talking about when we're talking about standards. And we've gone through in the last 30 years, we had just the standard of just got to get enough to pay rent on a studio apartment. And then we just kind of went, oh man, but I can't bring anybody home to my studio apartment. I can't have people over because it's not big enough. Or we had a kid. Now we're busting through. Now we got to get another new standard, and that standard's a 2-bedroom apartment. And then maybe it's a townhouse. And then now we want to rent a house. And then now our next standard might be to buy a house. So this is all we're talking about. This is not pie in the sky, like, oh, you got to have these standards of these religious standards of perfection and Martha Stewart or nothing, Ralph Lauren or nothing. No, we're just saying you will come against resistance. And it's that natural design that says you can either live continuously hitting against that resistance, you can capitulate and just be like, nope, I'm just happy and I'm just going to, my car died because I didn't put oil in it, and I'm just never going to drive a car ever again, and I'm just going to walk from here on out. Or you can continue to say, man, I want to be able to have a girlfriend, so I got to keep my car clean. I want to be able to host more people, so we need a 3-bedroom house or a 4-bedroom house.
Or I want to be able to run a business, and that means that I have to take a different approach to the work that I'm doing. And an example on a macro scale for that, I'm finishing up a contract I've been working on for the last 7 months. And it's been breakfast, lunch, and dinner every waking minute, every night, and every weekend, working toward figuring out how to get this contract done. And it will extend our runway for consulting and a series of other business ventures that we want to do. And it's not work that I'm used to doing. It's work it's research and legal documents and financial documents and expenses and burn rates and spreadsheets, and it's stuff that
you're doing the weightlifting in the Valley Forge right now.
It's been Valley Forge level stuff, and I didn't like it, and I really bitched about it probably for a month or two in the beginning. But then as I continued to do the exercises of figuring out how to manage my focus for whatever the biggest constraint was of that day. And there have been many, many constraints that were not resolved in a day or a week or a month or a quarter, day after day after day, like shipbuilding, right? This is more like shipbuilding level work. But I'm a big believer that God will use the phenomena of the universe and the materials and the formless substance that surrounds us to deliver to us again and again and again lessons that we need to learn and overcome in the form of resistance until we learn these lessons. And then coming out of this year, this 7 months of just brutal, very uncomfortable discipline of work, what I found is that running a business is exactly the kind of work that I've been doing. And I've run small businesses before. I made, a couple hundred, 3, 4, 500 grand, which is a small business, by the way, folks. I know that probably sounds like a lot, but the expenses that you have, you might run a restaurant and make 2 million, but you only keep 150,000 because your expenses are so high. So I'm less impressed by the top line revenue of a small business than I am what somebody's actually able to keep. But if you're going to run a business that makes you $1 million or $2 million or $5 million, either a year or 15 or 20 million when you exit, you're going to have to put in place systems and discipline and research and contracts and legal aspects and permitting and accounting and taxes and withholdings and quarterly tax reporting and all of these things. You can't run a business without these systems. And if you don't have a mindset that says, hey, we're building a ship that's going to get us where we want to go, and it might take a couple years to build the ship, or at least take a couple years to learn the skills as an apprentice to build the ship. This year, I've kind of been apprenticing to this bigger picture of myself of running a business, and I'm realizing that it is yet again an example of God using the formless substance and the phenomena of the universe to deliver to me in the form of resistance the very lessons that I've needed to learn in order to become the kind of person who's capable of running a $100 or $200 million business. And whether it ever gets to that point or not, I can tell you that I am now, in retrospect, grateful for the opportunities to work really, really, really hard at something that I've been terrible at, but I'm getting better, in order to adhere to this constant thermostat standard in my life that says that, it's billionaire or bust. And I haven't been real public about saying that before, but I can tell you that if we're driving past tens of thousands of houses that are $1 million each in Silicon Valley, then obviously there's people who are buying $1 million houses. And if there are 3, 4, 5,000 people on this planet who've made $1 billion or more, then then thinking that doing that is difficult is not doing us any service whatsoever. We should be thinking that it's easy. We should be thinking that it's gentle and that it's light and that it's just like shipbuilding. And eventually, 15 or 20 years from now, we'll have a ship that's worth $1 billion and it'll take us wherever we want to sail to.
And I'll leave you with this visual for those of you that are watching on YouTube. And if you're not and you're an audio listener, well, I will try to describe what I'm about to do as best as I possibly can, but you should go over and try and check out our YouTube and see how we've progressed over the years. If you started at the beginning of the Jeff Heilman Project, you'll definitely see that Jeff and I have changed over the years, but they're just getting better and better. And here's the visual. I'm holding my hand out flat and just my hand, and many people, when they think about strength and getting stronger, either financially strong or even physically strong, don't get started because they think, well, I don't have a degree in finance, or I don't have a 20-pound dumbbell. I have no access to what I'm perceiving as being the resources. But let me just illustrate for a second. If I raise my arm up and down right now with nothing in my palm, this right here in and of itself is a workout. This right here is...
It will be in an hour.
If I do this long enough, and as I do this long enough, this arm is going to get stronger and stronger and stronger the more I do it. And while I'm being creative, because this action always incubates creativity, that as this action continues, now I'm looking around and I'm going, there's a coffee cup right there. I bet that coffee cup, if I put that coffee cup in my hand, that's going to give me a little added weight. And for those of you listening, I just put a coffee cup in my hand, and now I'm using the coffee cup as I'm lifting my hand up and down. And this muscle now is going to be getting even stronger. And I could have no access to any resources. I could have no money to my name. But if I just look around and if I see, I bet that plant weighs more than this coffee cup. And if I just continue to allow the activity to incubate my creativity, before I know it, this is going to be one really super strong muscle. And we're going to be ready to not just be a part of a revolution, but we're going to be ready to win the revolution. So
Absolutely. Thanks so much for being with us, everybody, today on the Jeff Heilman Project. Today is, what is today?
August 4th.
August 4th, 2026 at the time of this recording. And we're entering in now to, I think we're fully into season 4. So we've been doing this now. We got over 150 episodes. We've got hundreds and hundreds of reels. We're starting to get 100,000 plus views on some of the reels that we're doing, which is way more. So it means a lot to us that there are people that are interested enough in what we have to say, or that Andrew's getting good enough at editing the reels that there's hooks that are interested to get people to pay attention. But for whatever reason,
momentum is momentum.
You're listening, whether it's a reel, whether it's long form, YouTube, or audio only. We're glad that you're with us, and we hope that there is a value exchange in at scale for the work that we're doing. So appreciate you being with us. Have a great rest of your week, and
Don't
we'll see you
forget
next
to
time.
like, comment, subscribe, and check out our website when you get a chance at thejeffheilmanproject.com. Love you guys. See you next week.
Thanks. Bye-bye.